Welcome everyone to Already Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Tara. We talk about TV shows here. The year is 2021 and the name of the show is Babylon 5. So, full spoilers for the episode, which is Season 2, Episode 18. It is called Confessions and Lamentations. So, this episode, very timely. I'm glad we hit this before we're out of the pandemic properly. Just so that it was vaguely topical to the world as it stands. Mm-hmm. So we're dealing with a plague of sorts that is going through an alien race called the Mercabs on the station. And not even just on the station. We find a ship where it's just nothing but dead Mercabs, and we hear at the end that millions of them have died in their home world. It's all very tragic. It's complete, compared to the plague, the Black Death, and at least one or two made up ones as well from the future that we haven't had yet. I'm just glad there wasn't like an eerie, like something that sounded like what we have right now. It would have been very
well. I mean, it was complete with hate crimes.
Yeah. If they'd said like a name, like a made up name, but it just happened to sound close to. If maybe the number 19 was in there or something, like, I don't know. It
is timely, yeah.
Weirded me out, that's all I'm saying. So that is the main premise of the episode, and we have Franklin in full doctor mode, try to do what he can to try and find a cure, find out what's spreading it. Because the big concern, obviously, once they're on the ship and once he's confirmed that there is a virus, there is a plague of some kind. Because at first he's told that these 4 deaths are just coincidence; they're all just natural causes. But it turns out that it is a thing that's spreading, and the questions then become: is it relegated to just their species? And if it isn't, then how is it being spread? Because if it's the air, we're on a station where all the air is being recycled constantly. So we're, up shit creek, basically, in that event. So, and with this comes a lot of interesting debates about what to do, how to treat the situation, both in terms of the medical side of things, the security side of things, and then on top of that, I'm pretty sure Delenn and Sheridan are like engaged now, so there's that.
Yeah, that escalated quickly.
It was funny though, that first scene with him like having the traditional Minbari like dinner was pretty funny. Like,
oh, I agree. Yeah.
Although I will admit, I thought there was at the very end, because the whole joke is, of course, is that she's like, oh, there's a lot of traditions, and in preparing the meal, Lanier had to like do this for 2 days straight without sleep to make sure we could all eat it. And if he makes a mistake at any point, any of these little details, he has to start from scratch. And but then there's also traditions when you're eating it. So Sheridan like goes to take his first bite. No, we have to do this, otherwise he'll have to start again. We can't eat this. You have to go start again. And she does like 3 or 4 things and keeps stopping him from eating. And there's one right at the end where she goes, oh, and now you can eat. Oh, no, with your right hand. And I genuinely thought it was going to like be like a 3-second pause, and then she was going to go, oh no, I'm just joking about that last one. Like, it really felt like it was building up to that last one was a joke.
The Minbari are capable of jokes. We found that out in previous episodes.
Honestly, it kind of led to my favorite exchange of the episode, which I didn't even understand, which is why I think it works so well. Is when Sheridan gets called away because there's a crisis, and he kind of politely sort of, thanks them for the invitation, but of course he's had a miserable experience where he's been told to wait and like pray after each bite and everything else he's went through. And when he leaves, Delenn and Lanier kind of like share a little exchange in their native language, so you don't understand what they're saying.
But their acting's really good. Yeah,
their performance here is great. It feels so natural. It really was like, obviously we see this from his perspective, where everything they've just done is super goddamn weird and tedious and frustrating. But as soon as he leaves, this is the not a couple obviously, but it's this you go to a couple for dinner, and once the person leaves, they're like, that was very rude, or he didn't understand what he was doing, or there's something to that effect. Like you got this kind of like, well, that was a disaster. oh, he's a complete buffoon. He's a barbarian. He was eating with his hands. Like,
I think it was more like Lanier was maybe a little bit ashamed that he fell asleep during his meal that he prepared. But then Delen's like, well, you know, he's human.
We skipped over that detail, yes. But during the meditation part, between each meal, or between each bite, I should say, at some point, Sheridan fell asleep during this process and was snoring and dreaming by the end. I'm not gonna lie. There was a point where I think Lanier shed a tear because he was so distraught that the meal has went
slightly
this poorly.
Insulted that his 3 Michelin star meal was a disappointment.
I'm all for savouring the food a little bit, but yeah, I mean, compared to the Minbari, clearly we eat, like, you know, rocket ships. I don't know. Not that rocket ships eat. I just meant something that goes quickly.
They take a lot of fuel.
And they take a lot of fuel, yes.
Sure.
Yes. We're consuming fuel. We're just like consuming fuel for liftoff, and then we just crash at the end of the day.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Which clearly that does not happen with Linear. Linear is up for 2 days straight making food. So, but that does lead to a couple of things though, because when they're quarantining all of the Mercab later, Delenn comes to speak to Sheridan and has this emotional thing where she's like, I need to go in there and help them, because she's had a one-on-one with like the child. There's like a child Mercab that she encountered earlier on, and he's like, this is serious, Delenn. If we find out this is, you know, contagious to other species, to Minbari specifically, like, you know, this could be a serious thing. I may not be able to let you back out. And she very emotionally says goodbye, and it's, you know, it's this thing, and
they like touch each other.
Yeah, the cinematography here as well gets very close. It's very like tight and close up on their faces, and she touches his face. It talks about how, you know, we all, you know, eventually we'll all end up in the same place at the end of the line, and there'll be no shadows. I think it was something to that effect. And he's so taken aback by this that I you know what, Bruce Boxleitner, I like a lot. He's very smiley with his performance, right? Sometimes it feels like he's almost a little too happy in certain scenes. I think he did such a good job here of being so emotionally touched and like almost confused with how intense it got, and not knowing how to feel, that when he kind of like, his voice kind of breaks a little bit as he says, next time we do meet, call me John. Like, when he says that, his voice is kind of, it's not all there. I got a little choked
up myself, actually. I thought it was really good.
It was, yeah, it was a sweet moment.
It was a very sweet moment. And I do genuinely like every time he and Delenn have a scene together and she like walks into the scene that he like lights up. Like, that's been pretty consistent throughout season 2. And yeah, especially here. Even after that dinner, he was still like excited to see her.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? Not every romantic pair in history are going to love everything about each other. There has to be some differences.
Yeah, it keeps things interesting.
Yeah, you know. But he'll just have to come up with a game that he plays or something, like in between each bite, you know, while they're doing their meditation. You know, he can
just think about baseball.
But likewise, I mean, we'll save the last scene actually for later, because I think the last scene, you know, is also the end of the main plot. And
right,
I'll say this: the ending, this episode has some balls on it. I was not expecting like, TV has you trained. You're trained for the main characters to, for the most part, save the day at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
Unless it's maybe like a 2-parter or something like that. And it's like, you know, a to be continued, dun dun dun, cliffhanger, whatever. This does not do that. This episode has our team essentially, and this is the cruel part as well, is that Franklin does actually come up with a cure. He comes up with, you know, it's not a perfect solution. It's this thing where, okay, it's going to take some time. They're going to have to be injected regularly with this thing to like get their cells up to like the standard where it won't affect them anymore. But he's got something. And then they go to the room where they were all staying, and they're all dead, including the child.
One's left.
Every single one is dead. And Delenn and Lanier stand up. They're okay, of course, because as it turns out, because there's a scare because one other alien species starts to like get sick and die, but it turns out that they're very similar to the Mercabs, so that they're the only ones being affected by it other than them.
Right.
But
the thing that the disease or virus attaches to is similar, but everything else is different.
Yeah. In the way, because this is the thing, like, part of me was thinking as Delenn was getting up and they were kind of like, obviously shaking, both of them, just because they're just sitting there in this room full of dead bodies. It is like super dark. It is like absolutely abysmally dark. Like,
and the reason that they went there was to comfort them while they were suffering also.
Yeah. And
so, they had to do it one at a time. Just the two of them had to comfort basically the whole species that's represented on the ship or on the station.
I mean, at a certain point they couldn't keep up, I'm sure. Like, there's a point where they were,
but like it must have just been overwhelming just emotionally to go through that too, to try to comfort all of them.
But I think that's part of the sadness, though, is that I think, okay, so they focus on the kid who seems to get sick first, and they're focusing on maybe the next couple. But at a certain point, there's so many people getting sick at the same time that when do they just lose hope of even being able to comfort everyone? And, like, so there's a lot of that builds up. But as Delenn was walking over to Sheridan at the end of this, I thought, oh, maybe this'll, like, almost do the bullshit TV thing, because I've seen this done in so many TV shows where just as two characters are getting close, there'll be something that makes one of them go cold and they won't want to be, like, thinking about that side of them anymore. This did the opposite. This did the thing that made complete sense, is she breaks down, and part of me was looking forward to the first time she was going to call him John, because it was going to be a sweet moment. This was anything but sweet. This was heartbreaking. This
was her needing comfort now. Yeah,
she just like collapsed into his arms and said his name. It was, I'm Team Sheridan Delenn now. Okay, I'm sold on the romance.
Yeah, it was good. They did a really good job on this episode. I actually really like this episode a lot.
As do I. Obviously, there's other details to do with the virus that we could talk about and the politics around it. But
plus, I needed a good Franklin episode.
That's true. He needed a good Franklin episode, and I think it is through and through a great Franklin episode. This is him at his best. This is him arguing for what he believes in and caring. There's a scene in here where all of his like staff are like hesitant to go and like inspect the second alien race that gets infected and dies. Like, he's like, oh, we need to like figure out the differences and what makes them similar so that we can like pinpoint what the thing is that's caused this. And it makes sense. Like, we understand that you're the process of elimination and connection here. This completely makes sense to us. And all of his staff are just like, you don't want to go near him. Yeah, we don't want to go ever near him. And he just makes this speech where he's like, you go and you get me this information. And the more information we get, the closer we'll be beating this thing. And if you don't go, then the virus is the last goddamn thing you're going to have to worry about. And he gets kind of threatening, but it's in a way that's like, no, you're rooting for him. You're like, no, yeah, scare the shit out of them. Like, get moving. This is time.
No, I agree. He was great in this.
So, yeah. And speaking of characters who are kind of great, we have the sort of the main Mercab we get to meet is the Doctor, who's already on the station. Who's actually played by an actor who's already been in the show. He played the judge in the couple of trial episodes that we had from Father Ted. He's back here but in makeup. I recognise the voice. I didn't recognise who he was though because of all the makeup.
He's a good actor.
He is a good actor.
He's really good in this role.
And this was one of these things as well, is that the alien race, like they had this plague kind of a long time ago. There was like an isolated sort of incident on an island where a bunch of people died, and they took it as a sort of like, oh, they were morally corrupt. So this was God punishing them. Yeah.
This also was very like, I mean, they brought up AIDS in the episode as one of the things that humans have gone through before. This is very much like inspired from the reaction to AIDS as well.
Yeah, which would have been much, relatively speaking, closer to the creation of this this show. Obviously, it's not, it's a bit later, but it's closer than the Black Death,
right?
A bit closer than that,
right? But just like the blaming of like, oh, it's because they were being sinful or because they were debauchery. They called the island like a pleasure island or something.
I think this the thing that stuck out to me though is when basically this idea that, and even Garibaldi knew this when they were talking about it, is that the Mercab, if you say that they might be sick, so they have to be quarantined, they'll be offended because to them that's you saying they're immoral and therefore that's why they might be sick. They don't see it as a scientific
right, which
thing.
makes sense with the history of their like angel of death story.
Yeah, but the reason why it specifically spoke to me though is because they talk about how like people like the first couple of deaths that happened were a few weeks ago or a few months ago, he says. And the family that it sort of started in, they didn't believe that they were infected, so they went out into the world, and that just infected everyone else, and it's spreading like wildfire now. And I just, this sort of arrogance of like, oh, it won't get me, like, you know, it won't happen to me, and then that's what it leads to, like, spread. Okay, this is hitting, like, after this last year, and some of the attitudes that certain people have had towards things, it's like, oh, come on. Like, but it feels true because of that. I don't like doubt it. I'm like, yeah, sounds about right. So I thought that was good.
Garibaldi had like an actual Bruce Willis moment where he got to punch out a bunch of dudes.
He did. They were attacking one of the, and even that had a moment because these three guys these three humans specifically are attacking a Mercab. It's basically a racial attack because they're to blame for bringing this to our station. So obviously Garibaldi has his little action scene and that scares them off. But there's even a moment for Garibaldi here, and it's not long. It's not like enough to make us think he was really going to not do it. But it's just enough to know that the thought enters his head as the Mercab, who's down and hurt, holds up his hand to be helped up, where Garibaldi might not want to touch him. Like, because he might get cut, and he does. Of course, he picks him up, he puts him over his shoulder, and he's like hero Garibaldi.
Carries him to sick bay.
Yeah, Michael Garibaldi, the straight up G that he is. It's heartwarming. I think there's multiple times in this episode where you root for Franklin, Sheridan, Garibaldi. I particularly enjoyed the scene where they're debating. Once they realize what they've got in their hands, and they have that meeting with like in Garibaldi and Ivanov is there and some of the other heads. If anything, it's a bit weird. I almost would have wished to have gotten Londo and Jacquard's reaction to there been an outbreak on the station.
They're all fighting a war.
Yeah, probably. But I actually really liked the debate about what do we do with the Mercab, because at this point they don't know for sure that, or you know, it's just speculation if it could spread to other races, and they're talking about, well, what do we do? Do we like segregate them all to like one part of the ship? And Franklin says, well, the problem with that is that if it doesn't spread to other people, all we're doing is damning them because they're all going to spread it amongst each other because they're all next to each other. They're all like enclosed in a space. But then Garibaldi brings up a fairly valid point, which is, well, once this gets out, though, they're going to be victims. People are going to attack them and lash out and look for a scapegoat. And it's easier to protect them if they're all in one place, which was a fairly valid point. But you know, Franklin's point is also, and he's proven right, because everyone, and what's so special about it is that no one forces them into this. This is not a decision that Sheridan makes. This is not a decision that Garibaldi makes. It's actually their own ambassador, his own arrogance, effectively, and delusion that. Well,
I mean, he's clinging to the old story.
Yeah. He basically wants them all to be together so that, you know, we're all moral, so we'll all be fine and we'll stay away from the others and all that. And that leads to their demise. It's a really sad. So much of it rings true. Like, even though obviously a lot of it's through the lens of like a made up alien race and some made up beliefs and rules, like so much of it rings true, not just because of what we've went through in the last year, although that certainly does help a little bit of context.
Sure.
Having actually experienced some of this.
There's some validity to it, yeah.
But because it does pull these gut punches where Franklin actually gets the cure, he has a solution, and they're just all dead. And does that really?
First, he has to watch his friend, the doctor, die.
Who sacrifices himself because they need because the virus is so quick that they need to study someone who gets infected, and this guy's, you know, the doctor, the alien doctor's like, I'll go into the surgery lab, the isolated room, and if I get it, then you can study me, and at least I'll have contributed to something good. Like, I can make up for my lies, I can make up for the fact that I didn't warn you, kind of thing. And it's a very sad moment. There's even like a Kirk Spock-esque moment with the hands in the glass when he first starts to get sick.
I felt it.
Yeah. I figured you would. I figured you'd get the Wrath of Khan moments.
There's a reason it works there too.
Yes, that's fair. So yeah, no, I and it's one of these things where at the start of the episode I was kind of like, oh, this feels fairly standalone. This isn't really tying into the ongoing war stuff. So I kind of almost set my expectations a little bit lower just because it wasn't like the big ongoing story. But as it went on, it kept doing these really smart things and having characters in positions where, like, Delenn going to comfort the alien race made complete sense for her character. Her moments with Sheridan were fantastic. The debates about what to do about the alien race on the station and how to respond to the reaction to this news. And I think it was very notable because sometimes when they're on the station and they're talking about, okay, during this crisis we'll do this and we'll put certain people there. We've heard them say that a bunch of times. This was one of the only times where I feel like it actually cut to a shot of these aliens, the Macabre, like being escorted into this chamber they get into to quarantine, and it felt like that you had all the security sort of lined up and they're being kind of escorted. It felt the imagery was very. We're carting off, even though it was actually the Macabre's sort of ambassador's own decision to have them all do this. It did feel like the imagery of being escorted by an army into a location of some kind. Draw the whatever imagery parallels you want with that, but
like a concentration camp kind of deal.
I always don't want to go that dark with it, but yeah, like it was hard not to like. It focuses on the kid as he's like sort of like kind of being scared, and
she was pretty good too. I thought like she didn't. Sometimes child actors can be kind of rough, but like she was actually sweet and emotional, and I thought she was good. She was a pretty good child actor, even under all that heavy makeup and prosthetics and stuff.
I actually wonder if the heavy makeup helped in a weird way with the kid actor.
Yeah. She was cute too, for being so ugly. She had like a sweet voice. She's like a little Jacob Tremblay.
I think the design of the Macabres was simple but solid. Like I think it looked good. And
it makes sense that they're all mouth breathers because they have no nose.
For sure, yeah. And it also makes sense to me that if you're going to do this emotional episode, we're going to make us care about a couple of these characters who are part of this race and give us this horrible ending, right? And I mean that in a good way. Then you don't want us to be going, the weird head prosthetic was goofy and they didn't feel real, they felt kind of silly.
No,
like
I wonder what they're going to do with all those masks. I guess they can actually sell them now.
I'm sure they reused them. I'm sure they painted over them and turned them into like Narn masks or something. I don't know.
Give them purple skin.
Yeah, I don't know what they do with them, but I'm sure they did something with them. I thought that stuff was really good. Obviously, Franklin has that scene where the bartender just spouts some. He cracks a bad joke about all the dead Macabres, and then he sort of like theorizes that maybe it was the Vorlon who did this. Like they spread it. And it's like jokes and conspiracy theories. That's all you've got. Like that's your reaction to all these dead people. Yeah,
he said something like happens every time or some sort of thing like this is just a cycle of what humans do. Yeah, which I think was one of my favorite things about the episode is, Delenn choosing to go inside to comfort them, and like just the contrast of what the Minbari did for a dying race that needed comfort versus like what the humans were doing, which was just be afraid. And then Sheridan has to like witness that too. Someone who was at war with the Minbari and now has very confusing feelings for one. And then, seeing that difference between the two species.
Yeah, I think obviously, I don't know if the warrior cast, for example, would be like this, but certainly Delenn and perhaps more of the religious cast. Like the idea of Sheridan seeing this and going, you know what, at least in this one particular way, I think they might be better than us. Maybe
Right,
I
yeah.
shouldn't hate them. You know, maybe I shouldn't hate them the way I did in the war. I just kind of, you know, jump to these because you're in a war.
Yeah.
They're trying to kill
And
me.
she was very much based on like what Princess Diana did too during like, you know, the big AIDS crisis of the 80s, and not that it's really over, but you know, the scare, really.
Yeah. No, it's a very impressive episode. It's a very impressive episode that
Honestly, this might be my favorite one.
really. Oh, there you go.
I really was impressed by this episode. I thought like the way the events escalated, like you're right, in the beginning I thought things were, it's just going to be another like villain of the week or something. Like they just had a goofy scene with Sheridan and Delenn, but even their stuff escalated like so far into like this real emotional relationship. Like wow, the episode really got me. The emotional stuff did. There's hardly anything to make fun of, which is odd.
It didn't pull any punches. I think
I thought the ending was super bold and like, well, I guess they're extinct. There might be some pockets. I was
impressed.
Of them. Yeah, that was a bold move.
They're going to be rare at the very least, but yeah, like I think one of the things you said there about the, you know, the sort of the goofier dinner scene with Delenn and Sheridan. I actually think, I mean, it was fine enough when on its own, when it was just because it was entertaining, but
oh yeah, it was cute and whatever.
But it actually serves a purpose though. It's like the contrast from that scene to where they are at the end is very important, and not just because it doesn't matter that he didn't really get our traditions and it was kind of silly to him, like, and that's irrelevant ultimately with how they feel about each other necessarily. I mean, obviously that's there and that's going to be important for the relationship going forward, sure, but beyond that, the contrast of this happy, silly, almost frivolous, like it just like accepting. I mean, hell, one of the things you just said there, we were talking about the like him witnessing what she does in this situation with these people and the compassion and the empathy. We start this episode with him witnessing her. Let's just call them what they are: stupid traditions and stupid little beliefs that are just kind of silly, but then we end them with this something that he can just respect, that he is in awe by because he couldn't decide to do this, and no, that he should have done. He's in charge. He's been making decisions. It's not good to anyone on the station if he gets himself into a position where he's dying. Like he kind of has to be around to do that. But you know, as number one would never let Picard go on the missions for the same reason. Like no.
Ooh, now you're bringing up Star Trek. That's twice this episode.
Well, you know, it's like, hey, sometimes the occasion calls for it, right? I'm not biased when it comes to my show references. Okay.
Well, except for one.
No bias. That every time I bring up that show, always completely justified.
No.
Completely justified. That's all I'm saying.
You do some mental gymnastics to get to those connections sometimes.
Oh dear. That's a super impressive episode.
Yeah, I just think it's really good. Like it's really well written. It's well directed. There's like a really cool shot of Franklin when he gets super mad. He starts breaking things and like the camera's like spinning around him. Like I don't think they've ever done that in this show before. Like some good directing moments here.
Yeah, it was like one of the things I said earlier about the scene where, you know, Delenn comes to see Sheridan to ask for permission to go into the quarantine zone. Like I noticed the direction in that scene, and not in a distracting way, but in a sense where it started out like a traditional just reverse shot of the two actors, but as it kept going, it got closer and closer. And not that close-ups are weird for this show or close-ups are weird for TV, but it was the way that it transitioned as the scene, as the acting was building up and getting more intense, as the conversation was getting more intense. It felt like it was perfectly complementing what it was doing. And I think for 90s TV specifically, that's impressive. Now I think we're a bit more used to it because cable shows, streaming shows have all kind of upped their game, and to the point where they're basically no different to movies. But TV in the 90s, even the best TV, like, I mean, Star Trek, just to bring up Star Trek again, Star Trek The Next Generation.
Yes.
Star Trek The Next Generation, like, it didn't have this for the most part. Like, it was solid enough TV direction for its time, but it wasn't exactly blowing your socks off. It was very simple.
Oh, come on. You're in season 5. Like, it's pretty good.
It's a great show, but like the point I'm making is that the little directing flourishes aren't there in the same way that I was noticing in this episode. And not to say that it's not had any before now, but yeah, like you said, like I felt like it ramped up a little bit for this one. Just the way it handled some moments, even the final shot of like Franklin walking off after like, you know, the bartender moment, and just sort of, you know, just it felt like there was some style to a lot of this. Again, no, there's been none. You know, I vividly remember the end of the episode where Jakar was talking to Sinclair's girlfriend about, you know, the wonder in the universe, and it ends in that shot of the bug on the I guess ladybug on the flower. Like, so there's little artistic touches like that the show's had, but this episode felt particularly strong with them. In fact, another good example is that moment I mentioned with Garibaldi, where the hand comes up and Garibaldi sort of, like, the angle of the shot, the way the hand's sort of coming from under the frame, and he has this moment to decide, like, if he's going to take it.
It's just a lot of really great storytelling. It's not like hitting you over the head with the references that it's making, but like it's enough to just for us to get it, not to, you know, think of the audience as stupid.
Yeah, I mean, that Garibaldi moment is two things. It's a glance from the actor, and it's the camera angle. It's those two things tell the story in that one shot, and that's it. And really, you know,
really terrific episode, I thought. And like I said, I needed a good Franklin episode, and I mean, they delivered. They gave me a good one, and I really liked his character throughout this whole thing too.
Yeah, his personal life's not that great, but when he's going full Doctor, he is far more interesting. Yes.
Just keep him away from the women.
You look kind of faint. You know, I can come back and examine you. I mean,
looks like you need a doctor.
Yes. My quarters is much closer to the med lab, though, so I mean, it would be much more convenient if you just come to my quarters.
Red flag, red flag. Stop it. I like him right now.
It just so happens I've got some anesthesia in my apartment as well. If you
take two of these.
Yes, no, that good Franklin. I mean, the funny thing is it's a good Franklin episode, but it's also just a good episode for everyone that's in it. Like,
yeah.
No one comes out scathed in this one. Everyone has good beats. Everyone, like, I guess Ivanova doesn't really get anything specific.
No.
Like, she's around and, you know, she's fine.
And Poochie's here also.
Oh, there's a plot. Yeah, there's a plot beat with him actually.
Yeah, it's important to like the overall story.
Yeah, it's important for later presumably, but it turns out ever since he saw the shadow ship, in the thing, you know, in the episode, he's been going out just on his free time.
Right, that's why we haven't seen him.
Exactly, he's been out looking for the ship. He's obsessed. But Sheridan, when he hears
a hobby.
when he hears this, tells Ivanova that to put a stop to it. This is against rules. He has to be. I mean, obviously he still has his free time, but he's not allowed to use the ship to go do this. And the ship should be ready to go out in emergencies at all times. Blah blah blah.
I suspect that's not the real reason he wants him to come back.
No, it's probably because he's actually. I mean, Sheridan knows a bit more about what these ships are. He's learned a little bit from Kosh and Delenn. He has a bit of an idea.
He doesn't want them. He doesn't want Kefir. Poochie. He doesn't want Poochie to give away that they know anything that's going on to the shadow. So
here's a question: when Ivanov at the start of the episode said, "We'll send that squad out when Kefir gets back," did you have to like think about who Kefir was for a sec?
No. I remembered, but I did forget he was a character.
Yeah. As long as you know it when you hear it, right?
Yeah.
That's the important part. When it comes up, you know it. So, hey. So yes. So that may be important for later. That's like a small little nugget for other things. But that just leads to them to go. They're sent out to find a ship that's they've lost contact with. It turns out to be a Markab ship that's just full of dead people. So
they got hit with the plague first.
Yep. Well, not first. Yep. They abandoned their planet.
I'm not saying that they're like patient zero. I'm saying like before Babylon 5.
Yes. I don't imagine that it slowed down the spread on the station though once you started bringing all these dead bodies on board though. It feels like a recipe for more. Don't ask me what the plague was called, because there was a name for it, and I'll be honest, even though he said it like 3 times, I never quite really heard what he said. It was like a noise to me.
Yeah, I can't remember. I watched it like an hour and a half ago.
Yeah, it was a weird word. I couldn't quite. I'd have to turn on the subtitles which I didn't have on to like catch it.
Yeah, I didn't either.
So, hey,
I wasn't eating any crunchy food. That's why I turn them on when I eat like nachos and stuff.
Yes, because the crunching inside your own skull makes it hard to hear dialogue. I know what you're talking about.
There's a lot of room to bounce around up there with the sound.
Don't belittle yourself, okay?
No, I'm just beating everyone to the punch.
No, fantastic episode. In fact, it feels weird to call it a dark horse or a gem, but just in the sense that I wasn't expecting it from the start of the episode, and then by the time it got to the end, I was like, oh, you did really special things here. You kind of, in a nutshell, did a lot of what makes Babylon 5 special, but maybe in some of the best ways that you've done so far.
Yeah, I think so. There's really not much to nitpick here. Not that we do that, but like...
Is that why this is going to be a slightly shorter discussion? Because you usually have things to nitpick over?
I mean, like, when I say nitpick, I mean, like, things to pick on.
Sure. Silly stuff, like, a cheesy bad guy with sunglasses, or similar such antics.
There wasn't any of that. I liked the aliens in this one. They were really great characters.
Yeah. And it gave you kind of a nice twofer where you had the character who had to redeem himself in the Doctor, but then you also had the kid who was completely innocent. It gave you a nice little range, so it wasn't just one character you cared about.
Yeah, the kid one was particularly crushing because, Delenn has been with her for the majority of the time when they get on board that extra ship or room or whatever it is, and comfort her and try to help her find her mom. And she asks her what her name is, and she says, Mommy. And so Lanier has to work off of that to find the mother. And then Delenn tells him, like, just, use faith. Like, faith will help you find her or whatever.
Use the faith, Luke. Use the faith.
Yeah. Well, they're very spiritual. So, but it does work, and they find, the mom is searching for the kid. And it's a sweet moment when they're reunited, and Delenn has a lot of really nice things to say and stories to tell, and then the girl kind of like tumbles over a little bit in some pain, and you go, oh no.
Well, and this is the thing, we don't see them again until we find out they're all dead, and it gives you that TV brain. Your TV brain's going because you're like, oh, it's teasing the kid's in danger because Franklin's going to figure this out in time to save the kid.
Yeah.
Right, that's what you're thinking.
Like, come on, Franklin.
And then it feels like he is.
Affected.
And it feels like he is because he solved it. He explains it to Sheridan. He's got like 500 doses ready to go with this thing. And he's like, let's go down there and let's do this.
Yeah, he says, like, he asks the security guard, like, has anybody responded yet? And they say no, which is odd already. And then when they open it up and no one's responded because they're all dead.
And it's heartbreaking. Yeah. It's no, it's got balls. This episode's got balls on it. Yeah. So credit where credit is due. So I'm not going to quite say my favorite. I think some of the larger scope story episodes. Like
I just think this one is really good. Like, there's just no. It's definitely. I think it's the best that it's shown us so far as like a tight story.
Oh sure,
for one episode.
It's your favorite. It's your favorite. Like I would probably pick. I would pick the episode from either a couple ago with Morden, or maybe the one with the war stars. Those are the two for me that are probably at the top of the food chain. But this is not far under those.
Yeah, I thought this one was terrific, but I would put over the Morden one slightly. I know that one's like the favorite, but I don't know. Something about this one. This one's just super clean, super gut punching, good characters. It's good acting.
All right, there you go. It's Babylon 5. Let us know what you thought of this episode in the comments below. Please do like and subscribe. That is the easy and simple way to support well, anyone on YouTube really, but us specifically. Also ding that bell if you want the notifications. And make sure you check out the other channel, Mail of Us Movies, if you want me and Tara reviewing science fiction movies. Our science fiction movie podcast, The Atomic Cinema Experiment, The Ace, is on that channel now. So if you do like us talking about sci-fi shit, then that's a good place to also get more of it. Tara, why don't you tell them all about Patreon?
Yeah, if you enjoy the reviews, please check out our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/MailofUsTV. And if you donate as low as $1 per month, you'll get access to bonus episodes for our sci-fi movie show. And if you donate $5 per month, you will get access to these Babylon 5 reviews 1 week early. And some other shows you get a week early, and some shows you get a day early. So please check it out. Thank you.
Yeah. So that is pretty much us. So thank you once again for watching and listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Babylon 5. Just don't give away the home world.